Welcome to another edition of Chew Chats, where plant-based eating takes the mic. Let's find out who our expert and topic are for today.
Welcome, Dr. Dulaney. We are thrilled you're here today to kind of give us the lowdown on, is it safe to eat soy or not? So why don't we get started with the first question, which is just obvious. Is it safe, Dr. Dulaney?
As long as you don't have an allergy. We all know from way back when in infant formula that a lot of times infants' formula was soy milk based and kids would get colicky. And I think that was probably the beginning of, yes, you can have an allergy to soy. So that was the first thing that got people all excited about soy products. And then, this word tofu is just so repulsive to most people. It's, associated with skinny, pale, tree hugger people that don't eat meat and, whatever. So that's, and it's going to taste, it doesn't taste like anything, or it's all mushy type of thing. So the short answer is soybeans is one of the most, widely grown bean on the planet. And it's in a lot of things that people don't realize it. And most of the people that don't like soy or are adverse to the idea of soy probably consume more of it than anybody else. Because if you're eating a junk food diet, chances are, and you're going out to fast food, chances are you're getting a lot of soybean oil in your food. The other thing people worry about, genetically modified. Aren't soybeans genetically modified? And yes, the ones that are fed to cattle, which people then consume, so that they're eating their genetically modified soy secondhand. So that aspect of things also is, somewhat, there's a little bit of a hole in that argument as well. And then the third thing is that people don't realize, almost everybody goes to a Chinese restaurant, right? Get that Chinese fast food with a bunch of soy sauce on it, which is genetically modified, most of it, and a whole host of other ingredients in that. So people don't mind soy sauce. They don't mind soybean oil. They don't mind cows that have been given genetically modified soybeans, but they're afraid to eat soybeans or soy protein, which can come in many forms. First off, people think tofu. Most people eat edamame, especially if they go to a restaurant and it's an appetizer with lots of salt and different seasonings on it. So they don't mind eating that then. Soy is actually very, very safe to eat. And I believe it should be part of your weekly diet, if not more than once a week. So we'll get into that a little bit more.
And so it's okay to eat soy, even though the cancer doctors told us for a while, don't eat soy, because if you've had cancer, breast cancer, that's an issue. But can you speak to that?
Yes. So soy contains phytoestrogens, and phyto means estrogen-like. And the biggest protein in soy is actually an estrogen receptor blocker. So that if you have breast cancer, and especially if it's estrogen receptor positive, we want to limit the estrogen because that will drive the cancer to grow. Soy actually is very protective. Just like tamoxifen, soy will block the estrogen receptor so that the soy can't stimulate the cancer to grow. So it actually is, there have actually been multiple studies showing a decrease in recurrence of breast cancer in people that have eaten soy. There's also been a study looking at head-to-head tamoxifen and soy, and they're very close as far as preventing estrogen recurrence. And there's also been studies with soy in the presence of tamoxifen and estrogen blockers that it actually potentiates the decreased risk of breast cancer recurrence. If you look in Asia, we can go back to Dr. Campbell's original work in the 80s. the women that had ate steamed rice, vegetables, and tofu, Asian women eat a tremendous amount, very low incidence of breast cancer. Japanese women, very low incidence of breast cancer back in the day when they weren't eating the standard American diet there. So even Japanese men have a much lower incidence of prostate cancer, even when you take in the fact of smoking. It still protects them against prostate cancer. So we have observational studies, and we have, ongoing, clinical trials. Dr. Campbell also, there's also been some, I actually believe it was, it may have been Ornish, his work that they actually used soy and breast cancer cells and showed regression of breast cancer growth. So, there's not a reason to, there's no reason to worry about soy. And I tell my patients with breast cancer, eat soy, drink soy milk. And another way that it, I know we're going to talk about, down the road, but soy actually blocks menopausal symptoms such as hot flashes and so forth. So if it was an estrogen stimulator, you wouldn't expect that to happen.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So what about nutrients? Is it a good source of protein, a good source of other nutrients as well?
So soybeans have the most protein per cup of any bean. So they are the highest in protein. The naysayers out there will say, yes, it has protein, but you can't absorb it. And that actually has been disproven as well, that you absorb the soy protein just as, adequately. So that's not going to be a problem. I have a anecdote on that. It's means nothing, but it means everything. My grandson has been raised on soy protein, and his doctor said when he was transitioned from breast milk that soy milk, he wouldn't absorb it, and it would inhibit his growth. And he is in the 95th to 98th percentile for height and weight, and certainly mental development. So, I think that, a case of one, but yet, certainly, had we saw some, decline in his growth or something, we would have questioned that. But soy is also very high in iron, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and it's actually a very high calcium food. So in this world of being afraid of osteoporosis and not getting enough of calcium, soybeans are actually one of the highest beans for calcium as well. So it's very nutritious as far as that goes. Yes, there's a little bit more fat in when you make tofu. Tofu is made out of soy milk that's been coagulated. And the good side of that is a lot of the times, and it's coagulated just like you would coagulate to make ricotta cheese. So it could be a calcium coagulant or a magnesium coagulant. But again, you get extra minerals, calcium and magnesium when you're eating tofu, along with the basic stuff in the soybean. So you're getting soy milk, which is not it is not genetically modified. That is soy milk that's used to make tofu, and it's coagulated to make a block or thickness, and depending on how you coagulate it is the thickness of the tofu. So because it's soy milk, you're taking beans, just like anything else, you're taking a liquid and it's somewhat processed because you're extracting, you get a little bit more fat. And so in the past, people's like, oh, it's a high fat food. The other thing is when you look at a block of tofu, it goes down pretty quick. So some people overeat tofu. And so it's more calorie dense than, say, if you were to eat a can of beans or so forth. Just like, so you could equate it to somewhat to eating hummus, right? So when you smash the chickpeas, you're making the hummus more calorie dense. When you process the soybeans into tofu, you're making it more calorie dense. And of course, we'll talk about other ways that you can do other things you can do with a soybean.
Yeah, and if it's tempeh, then that's not as concentrated, so it wouldn't be as
right. So tempeh is just soybeans that have been cooked lightly and then fermented. So you actually see the whole soybean. So all the fiber may have been broken down a tiny bit, but I've actually made tempeh, and it's quite the process. So if, it's well worth the price of purchasing, I believe. And I have actually did the math on that once too. By the time you buy the organic soybeans and you cook them just the right amount, you take the shells off, you ferment them at just the right temperature. You've got a lot of time and effort into very delicious tempeh, but a lot of time and effort.
Okay. All right. So I see that beautiful heart behind you. I mean, is it gorgeous? Is that what our heart really looks like?
No, this is a much bigger replica, because obviously you couldn't get this heart of me. So it's probably this is actually bigger than a cow's heart. But I brought this with me from West Virginia University, where I used to be on faculty. And I actually used a heart like this in training, because when we look at an echocardiogram, we're looking at a two-dimensional. So to look at two-dimensional and make it, and then, see what three-dimension is, it's a lot easier to sit with this and look at something that you can hold. I was not one of those people that were, organic chemistry was awful for me because of that spatial orientation thing. So having this heart was like my organic chemistry models that I could actually compare two-dimension to three-dimension. So that's why I really like this. And then a lot of people don't realize that the coronary arteries actually sit on top of the heart. The other thing so we have a coronary artery that comes down the front of the heart, one that comes down the side, and then a major coronary that goes down the bottom of the heart. So the heart actually sits in the chest kind of like this. And the other thing that is very interesting that a lot of people may not realize is that if you look, let's see if I can make it so people can see, in here, when the heart pumps blood out into the aorta, the coronary arteries are the first thing that receive blood when the heart contracts. So if your heart doesn't function properly, then your coronary arteries are the first to suffer. So that is, so the heart has to feed itself nutrients as well as the rest of the body.
Wow, I didn't expect a lesson in cardiology. Thank you. Imagine that.
It's my favorite topic.
Okay, well, speaking of the heart, does soy have anything to benefit with the heart?
So again, some people used to say limit the soy because of the fat, and that that may not be. It may drive cholesterol production even, but it's actually been shown to lower cholesterol. It's also been shown to have a positive effect on the endothelium. So we've talked about nitric oxide producing greens that dilate the arteries through nitric oxide, and the soy products have actually been found to be beneficial for the endothelial function as well. So there's no downside to using soy as a protein in our diet from a cardiovascular health. And I've not seen anybody, it's like, oh, now again, the problem that you have, I had a conversation with Dr. Esselstyn once about nuts, and I was like, are you really completely anti-nut? Do you? And he said, well, I can't, because people abuse that, when they say Dr. Esselstyn says, then they put in their own interpretation. It's like that telephone game. So soy, I believe, in some respects, if you're eating soy with some sort of goopy, fatty sauce on top, then you can start to make that into a very calorie dense meal. If you're deep frying it, or, you know what I mean? So we can mess up just about any food and make it bad, right?
We can definitely do that for sure. Okay, so you talked to us a little bit about breast cancer and soy, and also prostate cancer. That was interesting. Is there any other cancers that this might benefit? Just that's wonderful.
Well, and that's just it. So men often are worried about soy because they think that that's going to be an estrogen stimulator, and that it's going to cause, breast tissue to grow in men. And again, it's an estrogen blocker. If you want to eat something that's very high in estrogen, then you eat dairy, because a cow has to be pregnant to produce milk. And so the estrogen load of milk is going to be very high. The growth factors in milk is going to be very high. So that's going to stimulate cancer growth. There's no growth factors, in soybeans to make, a soy, there's no offspring of a soy to make it grow into a giant soybean or whatever. So we don't need the growth factors, but there are antioxidants and phytonutrients that, again, decrease blood vessel growth into cancer cells, decrease cancer cell division. So it sort of slows that process and or reverses it. A lot of what we do nutritionally is, yes, we want to help with what we eat, but we also want to take offending agents away. So it's not only about what we do eat, but it's also about what we don't eat. And replacing dairy with soy is a positive win because you're getting rid of growth factors. You're getting rid of those direct estrogen hormones that are going to play a role.
That's good news. Good news. What about the thyroid, though? Seems like I've heard something about the thyroid and soy having a problem.
To inhibit the thyroid gland normal function, you would have to eat a boatload of soy products. So that's really not an instance. But people that take thyroid replacement medication, soy can block the absorption of the medication. So it's best to space that out. So I wouldn't have and most thyroid medication is taken on an empty stomach anyway. But you wouldn't want to take your thyroid medication and sit down to a tofu scramble. Yeah. You want, several hours of digestion away from that. So if I were, I would at least make it a lunch rather than a breakfast if you were on thyroid replacement. Dinner would be fine.
Okay. And then what about things like, you already talked about hot flashes. Was there anything else about that and fracture risk?
Yeah, again, because of the calcium associated with it, the protein associated with it, there is improvement in bone health because of the minerals, calcium, magnesium. So improvement in bone health, also in the keeping fluid into the skin, decreasing wrinkles, perhaps a little bit. It's all, again, a positive aspect of that, skin elasticity, just like blood vessel elasticity. Anything we do that increases our blood flow is going to help our skin as well. So that's really the mechanism of most of these things.
So even our hair could benefit from
absolutely skin, hair follicles. Again, part of improving diabetic neuropathy is not treating the nerve, but treating the blood supply to the nerve. And so when we open up those little capillaries to the little nerves at the end of our toes, just like the little capillaries to our hair follicles, then you improve blood flow and you improve health.
Oh, and you know all about those little blood vessels and keeping them open. So good news, good news. Okay. Well, sounds like we should be eating some soy products. So how should we go about doing that, Dr. Dulaney?
Well, you showed a slide, or I think you have a slide with edamame, and that's certainly, you can buy edamame in the little packages at Publix. All you have to do is throw them in the microwave for a couple minutes and do a salad topper. So that's probably the simplest way to eat soy. You can cook and eat soybeans just like you eat Great Northern beans or any other white beans. That's certainly a possibility. You can do, then if we move on to tempeh, has a texture, it has a fermentation to it, but you can crumble that and put it in sauces to make like a bolognese sauce. You can do the tempeh in strips. We make a tempeh Reuben. We have that recipe in our cookbook, that it's made, as in a sandwich, so you can use that slice for lunch. You don't have to even cook tempeh. You can just get it out of the package and eat it raw and slice it or season it or put a rub on it and do it that way if you like that fermented taste to it. So it is somewhat of an acquired taste. Tofu, as you know, has no taste for the most part. You have to season it with something. It's like cottage cheese. Cottage cheese is nothing without, pepper, usually salt and pepper and or fruit or something, right? But people have, and it's kind of funny because, people think cottage cheese is a health food. So even though it is relatively tasteless, people will eat it just because they think it's a health food, right? It's like the number one diet food. Women eat cottage cheese and pineapple for lunch on just virtually every Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig diet over the years. That was the protein source, and I mean, it's kind of funny because it has no taste to it at all, but it was a health food. If you put tofu in its place and you say, okay, I want to use that as my health food, then you can scramble it. So you can make an egg salad. So we make a mock egg salad with a little bit of relish, a little bit of mustard, turmeric. You make a great egg salad sandwich that way. Stuff with last week we had pita bread stuffed with tofu egg salad with tomatoes and some pickles and greens. I mean, it was delicious. You can do a tofu scramble. So just like you would do an omelet, you can do tofu that way. We put tofu in soup. So if you make a soup, it's your bean source when you're making a soup. So we do a pho and that has tofu in it. We do a mushroom soup that has tofu in it. You can crumble it up and do a variety of things. You can crumble it up and put it in the oven, season it with Italian seasoning, use it for a hamburger. You can make it a Mexican seasoning, make it used to do like a taco filling. You can, we just bake it sometimes. We season it. I'll roll it in a little rice flour and season that and bake that to go with the stir fry. That's probably one of the things we do most often. And lately, my family liked crab cakes. And so we do have a recipe with crab cakes made of hearts of palm and artichoke hearts. But lately I've actually switched it up a little bit and crumbled tofu and a little vital wheat gluten and, some Old Bay spices and red pepper and made a crab cake that way. Delicious. Dessert is I don't have it, but it's not much different than a coffee cup. It's maybe a little bit bigger. This is my yoga ball, but at about half, I put a frozen banana. I chop up in the bottom, and then I fill the rest of the container with various frozen fruits. Blueberries are usually part of it. Sometimes there's mango. And then I fill the rest of the cup about halfway up with soy milk, and if I want to make it chocolatey, I add a tablespoon of cacao powder and I just sit there with a spoon and make soft serve. So the only thing I have to clean is my container here. I don't have to clean the blender. So that is a poor man's ice cream for the evening. You can make puddings. We've done a banana pudding with tofu. So if kids aren't sick, if kids are sick or if somebody is sick and doesn't have a good appetite, you can do a lot of things with tofu, even adding it to a smoothie, the silken variety to a smoothie, to add calories to somebody or to add a little extra protein if somebody is malnourished. Mm-hmm. If people aren't malnourished, then I don't typically say add, any kind of soy or protein powder to a smoothie. But if somebody's malnourished or they're sick and they don't want to eat, or if you've had a dental procedure, perhaps, that's a good way to get things in.
Wow. Those are a lot of good ideas. It sounds like your nutrition class right now.
The Dulaney people like to eat. So what can I tell you?
Well, who wouldn't with those recipes? Thank you so much, Dr. Dulaney. That was really good. There were so many interesting facts about how soy really is good for the body. It does the body good, right?
It does. Like I said, I recommend that. The other thing as far as breast cancer prevention is, we have mushrooms in our stir fry. So a variety of different mushrooms, good for immune health. Again, a little bit more vitamin D. So those mushrooms and tofu in combination in dinners are excellent.
Oh, yes. Mushrooms are the best. You're right. Vicky eats a bowl of those, I think, every day. So great. Well, thank you again. And the reason why we did this podcast was because Dr. Dulaney the reason we did this video was because Dr. Dulaney has a podcast, which is fantastic. You'll want to watch it. I put the Zoom link below about that. And she did one on soy, and I thought, oh, that's so good. We need to have her talk about that some more. So thanks, Dr. Dulaney, and we'll see you next time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.